afternoon to all of my watchers and listeners, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Pastor Regan Sunderland, Tulare Bethel Church, with my wonderful sidekick, Dietrich Carter. Hi. And we have something special for you today. We have our guest, J.J. Ferrel, a missionary extraordinaire to Eastern Europe. We're going to talk a little bit about Romania. We're going to talk a little bit about Spain. We're going to talk about the process of what it is to become a missionary, and we're going to hear about what God is doing around the world. So I'm excited to have J.J. Ferrel with us. Now, J.J., I met you in our denomination. Many people don't realize, but Tulare Bethel Church is an Assembly of God church, and J.J. Ferrel is an Assembly of God missionary. So we actually met in an ordination class down south, and from early on in that class, we sat together and we laughed together. That's pretty much what we did, you know.
Learned a few things here.
Learned a few things.
Some from the class.
Some from the class. I mean, it's funny how I was just online recently and I was reading a friend's post, and he was asking, you know, how many of you have college degrees and how many of you are using them? And probably 99% of the people, a lot of them were using their college degrees, which was cool, but almost everyone said, what I learned in school has basically no bearing on what I'm doing. Like, for example, it got them into the job, but everything they've learned, to become productive in what their field is just hands-on and just jumping in. And I feel that way a little bit in ministry sometimes too. Sure. We step through all of the hoops and we do the certifications and the licenses and getting degrees and stuff, which all help and help you have a better grasp of scripture and understanding. And there's definitely principles we use, but a lot of ministry is on the fly.
A lot of it is on the fly. And a lot of the things that are being written in books, like the catch is that, you know, someone goes through a great trial, or they acquire great wisdom in a particular subject. Then they go through the process of writing it out, and then they go through the process of trying to get it published, and then it's going to hit the shelves. You're like years away from that experience. Sure. And the world just evolves.
That's right. World's moving quickly.
Quicker than ever.
So, JJ, for the last, I don't know, you can tell us how many years you've been doing it, but you've been in Romania. So let our watchers and listeners know kind of what you've been up to the last, decade or 2 decades, 25 years of your life. Kind of let people know who you are. Like, what have you been up to?
Well, okay, what I've been up to, I've been serving as a missionary in Romania. I initially went to Romania in 1990. I went in 1995 with the group of the teenagers from the church. It was the youth group that went with a bunch of other people.
So like a short-term mission
trip, 2 weeks. We went to Romania. Backpacks and peanut butter. If you've been on a mission trip, you know what I'm talking about. We did all that stuff, and man, I saw street kids. I saw kids, crawling in and out of sewers, and shocked me. My 18-year-old brain had no idea that anything could ever exist like that. Shook me to the core, and it was the organization that. The organization that organized this mission trip, they said, those of you who are past high school and somewhere not committed in life yet, this kind of pre or, post-college age, consider giving a year to missions because you'll never get the chance to do it after this.
Wow.
And this was, I had something going on inside of me already. And when this guy said that, I thought, that is it. The day before, where really all of the soul searching was when I saw these street kids. Well, I heard that street kids existed on the plane going over to Romania. Okay. With another people. There were several youth groups that kind of
merged together
to make this one trip, and there were people talking about street kids. So I heard about it on the airplane, but I had never really experienced it. I've been to Mexico, and I know people will refute this, but I mean I had seen what were supposed to be street kids, and then you see the parents are right over there.
Yeah,
so I was really intrigued. What is this about? And I heard that they lived in sewers, and it was kind of it was really interesting and really intriguing to me, and I wanted to see it. Like I was very curious, and then when I did see it, it was nothing like I imagined. They weren't sweet little kids. They were dirty, filthy 7 and 8 year olds smoking cigarettes and drinking rum. People were drunk and they were unruly, like belligerent drunks hanging out in front of a bar. And
yet only 7 or 8 years old.
Wow. The oldest was maybe a 9 or 10 year old.
Wow.
And they were children that were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they were a group of like maybe 10 or 11, and just kind of hanging out on the edge of this group of people that had gathered to hear what we had to say in this evangelistic crusades. So I saw all this, I saw these kids, and I had this list of things you could say in Romanian that were Jesus loves you, and God is the light of the world, and all these little catchphrases, positive messages that I was going to go over there and pep talk these street children and
kids living in sewers.
Man, I remember when I saw them and I got close enough to realize what was really going on. I remember I just stopped and probably stared for a long time. I remember looking at the list that I had and looking at my camera, because I was going to go over there and take some pictures, and just thinking, man, JJ, they're not animals that live in a zoo. They are children that will grow up, and this is their reality.
Well, and you were only 18.
I was 18.
I mean, I could only imagine. I'm only 23, so that few years back, I couldn't imagine myself seeing children in a sewer.
And this was obviously before YouTube and before before you see things on what has become social media. Like there was none of that stuff. There was barely email at this point.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean,
email account.
It wasn't just we didn't have like the social media burst like we did now.
You didn't have a way of really
seeing
these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
So I remember I didn't even get to the kids. I looked at these things, looked at them, stared for a while, turned around, and said, God, I can't act like I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Right.
So you were just wrecked by what you saw.
Oh my gosh.
Kind of reminds me of Jesus when he was looking at Jerusalem, probably from a hilltop, and just saying, he wanted to gather them to himself, and he was just moved emotionally. The same thing. You're just looking on the hurt. And then I remember when Tanya and I took a short-term mission trip to Ecuador, and the same kind of thing happened. I was wrecked because I was seeing the abject poverty of these 3 little girls, and I knew I had 3 little girls at home. So then all of a sudden it just really hits home, and I remember just weeping, just being moved and weeping, knowing that all that my daughters will have and the doors that are open to them, that these kids will never have any of that, let alone never
all the
hearing
bikes.
None of that. Well, it was crazy because, here in the United States, if they don't get exactly what they want on their Christmas list, now my kids are, I'm going to say amazing, but I mean, all kids are the same. I didn't get the PS4 that I wanted or whatever. And so it's like,
my iPhone isn't blue.
Yeah, those kind of things. But they were playing with a plastic broken Fisher Price toy that had none of the moving parts left on it. It was just basically a plastic, and they kept it on this table, and they said, come here, look at this. And it was like their greatest treasure. And it would make the junk pile here. They probably got it out of the trash. The mom kept all of their precious belongings in an old broken oven, and all of their precious things were in this oven. And so she'd open it and she would show us like a chipped cup or something, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And so you look at those kind of things and you're moved by what you see. But then even in light of the gospel, because we're ministers of the gospel, realizing that many of these people have never heard even about Jesus, and so then you're doubly moved, or maybe more moved in one sense, knowing that, even if, they were telling us, that people in the United States see the abject poverty and they'll give them, they'll actually, they were telling me this one story about a missionary brought a team over, and the team of Americans looked around and said, well, what they need is a goat, because they can milk the goat and all of the rest. And so somehow he bought a goat for them. No place to put it, no place to feed it, and all of the rest. Well, of course, they butchered the goat within hours and ate it, and then it was gone again, but people in America just have no idea generally how to meet those needs on the ground. That's why it's so important, with what JJ is doing and other missionaries around the world, that we partner with people who have boots on the ground. Right. I was again talking to another missionary who said teams would come over in short-term missions trips and maybe spend $40,000 flying all of their people over, and they would maybe paint a couple walls and run a VBS, and they're really grateful for that. Right. But he's like, if you would have sent me $40,000, I would have built 4 churches. And so I just realized that, what needs to take place is we really need to partner with people like you who are actually doing the work of the ministry on the ground, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, and recognizing the needs of the people, because Jesus often met the needs of the people long before he poured into them spiritually. Because when people are hurting, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. The old cliche. Go ahead.
I would even couple into that. It's compassion ministry is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Like you said, people really, they don't want to hear about your Jesus. They want to hear about my stomach is growling. Tell me. Can you please help me with that? Then after if you genuinely help them and they genuinely perceive that you care, they're so much more open to hear about your Jesus after that. Compassion ministry is a beautiful, 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 wonderful thing. I think that Jesus always went beyond just the compassion to now let's address your soul. Always. We have always been active in compassion ministry, but never leaving it there. You have to because I used to wander the street. Well, this is a beautiful thing again. I used to wander the streets with teams of people handing out sandwiches, and when people are hungry, give them something to eat. Okay. But everybody's going to be hungry in 2 hours again. What are you going to do? Show up with another sandwich? And show up with another sandwich. That's great. I was working with these street kids, and just so everybody knows, I don't exclusively work with street kids anymore. That's just kind of that was the hook that got put in my heart. And we do work in compassion ministry, and we do it kind of in a what I call strategic help sort of a way. But you can't really. I think it's beautiful to help people, and we should help people as much as we can. But once people are curious about your Jesus, you better be willing to give them what they really need.
You can have a full belly and go to hell.
Oh my gosh.
And Jesus even said, the poor you'll always have among you. And so the gospel is the big thing. I knew
a street kid who, a street adult, became a street adult. And he was saying, people will treat people that live on the streets and say, oh, because you live on the streets, man, you really need Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. Everybody needs Jesus. Because you live on the streets, you really need Jesus. Almost as if to say that if you live on the streets, you're not going to be saved. He said, well, is the opposite true? Because people have houses, they are? No, they're not. Well, I know I past plenty of houses where they are probably not serving the Lord.
Totally.
Where you live and what you have in your wallet does not equate to your spiritual condition one bit. It's just food helps people wake up to the idea that I will listen
And
to
Scripture says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul?
Yeah.
So your life can be filled up with a lot of things, a lot of food.
Yeah.
And here in America, especially, the church is in decline. Even though we have mega churches and people touting, I got 2,000 people in my church, the statistics are the church is in decline, and we really are entering a place where, like in Revelation, it says, we think that we got it all. But he's like, you are naked, you are blind, you are wretched, and it's just interesting.
Isn't it Apostle Paul that said that in the last days, people are going to be gathering around them, people that are going to be able to say what their itching ears are going
absolutely. And what's crazy is when you look at what has happened through the last 100 years as America has been blessed by God, the church in revival, even out of Azusa Street, sent missionaries all over the world. Well, a lot of those churches and organizations in Africa and Central America and around the world have now matured into just amazing churches. And the crazy thing is they're now sending their missionaries to the United States.
Wow.
So
coming to save us.
Yeah, we think
you meet a Nigerian missionary in California. You say, "Oh my gosh,
wow,
yeah.
What's going on?"
And they're sent here by God, and they carry fire, and they're just like they're amazed at how asleep the Western church is, So that's what's kind of going on. But we talked about JJ. So he goes on a short-term missions trip, and he gets wrecked by what he sees, and says, "I'm going to go sow my life for a year." That's turned into 25 years, and so you've been in the country of Romania.
Been in Romania.
And what do you do primarily now in Romania?
Primarily now, I do youth ministry.
Yep.
So I do just about anything that you can probably point at in youth ministry. But we're trying to accomplish the goal of putting youth ministry on the map, not just in Romania, but all across the continent of Europe. And we have lots of different plates that we spin to make that happen. So predominantly, most of the people in the local church where I would serve, they say predominantly you're the youth pastor.
Yeah.
Because I was the local youth pastor in the local church, and everybody, that's what I was. Beyond that, I'm also a youth evangelist. So all around Romania, I'm preaching at the camps and the conferences, and I work a lot. I work a lot with churches that don't have youth ministries and help them to start youth ministries. So I do a lot of leadership mentoring, just a lot of one-on-one stuff. I figured out once upon a time that. At least my personal philosophy and my anointing was to not make a system. It wasn't a system that I was trying to make. It was every individual church is actually different, and every church has their own do's and don'ts, and they've got their written things you do and the unwritten things that you don't do. Like you can't go to a church and say, hey, now you're going to be a part of this. Group of 35 different churches that we're helping. You got to do the steps. No, we've always treated each and every church and each and every leader as their own identity, and help them, mentor them through the process of starting youth ministry.
So what you're saying, it's not a one size fits
definitely not
all.
A one size fits all.
Yeah.
So I help churches start youth ministries. I teach youth ministry in Bible schools. I'm a few years ago, the doors kind of opened. I've always had this thing. I've always had this thing inside of me that said we just need to make sure that youth ministry is normal everywhere. Yeah. Every local church needs a local youth ministry. I'm a firm believer. And then I got saved in the youth ministry. I've gone back to those days in my heart and in my mind often, many times, and said, if my local church, if Canyon Hills Assembly of God would not have had a local youth ministry, would I have found the Lord? I don't know. I don't think I would have. I really don't. I remember being invited to go to Canyon Hills, the Sunday service, and saying no. Long before I was invited to go to the youth ministry. I went to the youth ministry for like probably 6 months before, I felt like I could fit in.
Yeah.
Because people just kept on insisting that I need to go to that Sunday morning service. Well, so I don't think I would have found the Lord. I really don't.
I have a friend who is saved, was a worship leader, went away to Kansas City IHOP. And the way he was saved was he was invited to a youth group, and he was like you. He's like, no, I'm not even going to church. But there was a girl from his high school that he thought was cute. And he found out that she goes there. So he went to church for a girl and got Jesus.
Best idea.
And got Jesus in the process.
Yeah. So we're very involved, very proactively involved. None of this stuff is, we'll see when it happens. Man, this is what fills my calendar. We make sure that we're doing youth ministry training, training leaders, the proactive idea of so youth ministry is, people might be listening and saying, well, what's the big deal? Youth ministry is not really valued the same outside of the United States.
Wow.
It is outside of, I would say, North America. Mm-hmm. Hey, North America values youth ministry like nowhere else on the planet. Mm-hmm. Second would be Latin America. And even when you go into Latin America and you hang around the churches, you'll realize that there's even a lack of youth ministry there. You get to the other half of the world, that Eastern Hemisphere, there's a ridiculous lack of youth ministry. The local churches treat youth ministry kind of like an accessory. You can have it or you can not have it.
Sure.
If most of the youth leaders in your, I can speak very, very, very precisely to the theme of youth ministry in Europe. Most of the youth leaders are full-on volunteers, which I wouldn't say that volunteer youth leader is a bad thing.
Yeah,
it can. Some of the best youth leaders in the world are actually volunteers, homegrown in their own local church, doing youth ministry. They feel it to a different degree, and they're not going to leave after 4 years. Hey, that volunteer youth leader can be a really, really solid person.
Sure,
but the concept behind we're not really investing in this. That's there. And that's a problem. Yeah. And you find that many, and in some places, most of the churches don't have any youth ministry to speak of.
Yeah. And that's
an issue.
And the crazy thing is statistics bore out that more people come to faith as children or in their youth years than, I'm not saying, I don't know how the correlation between that and adult ministry is. I just know I've seen as just a strong percentage of kids and youth coming to know Jesus, especially in those formative years.
Yeah. Right. I think that's why we're growing. I mean, even I'm like you. I mean, I would not be where I am today if I wouldn't have had youth. I mean, like, I'm lucky that Bethel had a good youth program, and that's what, even after my family, like, we went after youth, went somewhere else, I came back because I was like, no, this is my home. Like, because something in youth kept me there. Like, to this day still go back to, like, no, like that, I remember those days where those were those struggles then, and now I have the youth program there to actually get me through it. It was very important, but I find it interesting that you say that, like, it's not as important somewhere else, because I feel that here, that we don't, our church, we have it, but there's, in general, around here, there's not very many youth programs as there used to be.
It's true. In fact, even in our area, I think that there's two.
I can speak to more precisely what that is.
Yeah, in our area, I think there's only, like, I may be wrong, but 2 full-time youth pastors in the AG in our area.
Yeah.
Something crazy. Everybody else is volunteer. So there's a less emphasis. What were you going to say about that?
Right now, it's kind of side railing, and I don't want to side rail it too much, but the phenomenon that we have right now in the church, obviously COVID has thrown a serious monkey wrench in everything, but it has drastically affected youth ministry globally.
Yeah. Okay.
Before I left Romania, we were looking into what are the numbers? Because, man, I'm a part of a group of people at least in the Pentecostal world where we are actively looking to what is youth ministry exactly? Like, what are we really talking about when you say youth ministry? We found in Europe that of all of the youth ministry that did exist, and we're still talking about a continent where there's a huge lack of youth ministry. Of all the youth ministry that did exist, about 70% of that youth ministry is paused or stopped.
Wow.
Okay, so we're talking.
It's a big sprint.
From 2 years ago, hey, we have 30% of the youth ministry that we had 2 years ago, and it was already a huge lack.
Yeah.
I came to the United States wondering, what's it going to be like here? Most people don't know this because I wasn't flaunting it necessarily. I got back to the United States, and there was a church pastor in San Diego that gave me a call and said, JJ, we haven't a larger church, predominant church in San Diego. And the guy said, man, JJ, we haven't had youth ministry for 7 months.
Wow.
We've tried.
Yeah.
We have some leaders. But it's just it hasn't been working.
It's changed.
Help us out.
Yeah.
So I just ended the time working with them, just trying to get the youth ministry back on its feet and looking into just the area of San Diego.
Yeah.
What's going on? We tried to do some stuff, man. The youth ministries were just not open.
Yeah.
I think that hopefully now there's going to be more and more opening, but they were not open. And the youth leaders that I was reaching out to were just saying, we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
I think it's harder though to like reach out to youth nowadays. Like I have a younger sister that's 14, and her age group compared to when I was 14, like the difference is they're more materialistic now versus they want, like, I don't know, at least in my experience in my age group when I was younger, I was able to very easily convince my friends to come to youth. I was able to be like, hey, let's, we have some rockin' music, I had a bunch of friends that liked the rock music, so it was like, I got them to come for the music, but they stayed because of the messages and that they were able to actually find a connection. And I don't think it's easy like that.
I don't think
anymore.
those things really impress kids anymore.
No.
With the way the internet is and the way everything is just at your fingers,
Entertainment is not going to bring kids in the
that's
door.
right.
No,
it's
won't.
just not. And
It's not the same.
And
Pizza, unimpressed.
yeah.
Yeah, you can't just say, let's have a pizza
Smoke
party.
and
anymore.
mirrors, they don't even care because they
Unimpressed.
Yeah, unimpressed.
Yeah, unless you can have a video game tournament about God, I don't think you can get them over there.
It's just people.
We found that one of the common denominators, and I don't want to sidetrack the whole thing, but one of the common denominators we're trying to figure out, okay, if 70 has paused, 30 is active, what are some common denominators we can find? What's going on? It became pretty clear pretty quick that the youth ministries that had some sort of a discipleship, this is not rocket science.
Yeah.
Some sort of a discipleship aspect, especially a small group aspect where you're not a part of the crowd, you're a part of the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are not just on their feet, they're thriving still, even under COVID.
Yeah.
And after a little while, you find that and you say, okay, let's change the way we approach the question.
Yeah.
Do you have a youth ministry? Yes. Do you have small groups? Yes. Those two yeses are always standing side by side.
And that even in our church throughout COVID, we realized even in the adult ministry that things are changing and things are pivoting. And how are we going to reconnect our church after being locked down? How are we going to rebuild community? All of that. And as I prayed about it, we relaunched in our church House Fire Groups, which is basically small group ministry. And we have over half the church already involved in that, which is pretty cool, you know, but so many people want to come and sit in the crowd for a few weeks and be like, check you kind of out. But then the longing is for interaction, because I don't care how connected you are online, you're still lonely, because we were created for personal community, and fellowship. So even in the youth ministry, I can definitely see how people want to get together, and people are wanting the authentic. They want to be able to relate.
We just went through a whole season where if your way for getting people in the door was a trick with smoke, lights, and music, that's over. That was irrelevant for 18 months. You know, what are you going to do with the individual soul?
Yeah, what are you going to do now?
You're not going to do smoke, lights, and pizza. You might do pizza in a small group, but you know, you're not going to. Those old tricks. They were not going to work anymore.
So you've been in Romania for the last 25 years. What would you say the spiritual climate is in Eastern Europe and Romania? Just speaking, not just for youth, but in general. In general, what is the climate like over there as far as, are they open to the things of God? Are they closed? Are they hesitant? Do they trust? What's going on in Romania and Eastern Europe?
All of the hot button topics that we have here in California right now, and I say California is probably a good reference point. Okay? All of those hot topics that we have in church and society right now, we've been talking about those for all of the 25 years that I've been in Romania.
For example,
gender issues, family. You could easily hover on those, and then the receptiveness to is the Bible really infallible? If man had his hands in the transferring of the gospel, how much did man's hands change that message?
Sure. Yeah.
Did God actually speak to people, or is Bible equal to the Quran? Yeah. Like real questions that people are really starting to ask. We've been grappling with those situations and those subjects as long as I've been in Europe, and hearing little things pop up here and there. You say, "Wow, that sounds a lot like the European Union." Yeah. It sounds like the start of what we were hearing in the European Union a long time ago. So society has kind of been spinning in a different direction. So you have Eastern Europe and Western Europe, two entirely different cultures. Basically, Eastern Europe and Western Europe kind of there's a line that is really Eastern Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, and Catholicism, and how have those Christian expressions affected society?
Sure.
Without anybody getting, I'm going to say this nicely.
Without offending anyone, I'm about to offend you.
I'm trying to say things in a nice, in a really positive way.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I went to, a few years ago, the Lord opened up the doors, and all that we've been involved in Romania, in a weekend, the Lord opened up the doors to all of Europe. Wow. So all the stuff that I was active in Romania, it turns out that really it's everywhere. It's well beyond Europe, and even the most famous countries in Europe are still in an incredible lack of youth ministry. An incredible lack of, and most of the countries in Europe, in their Bible schools, they teach nothing on youth ministry. You just don't have anywhere to learn about youth ministry. When we ran the numbers last time, I believe there were 5 different countries. We included Romania because I was in Romania doing something. You take me out of Romania, who now is going to be teaching on youth ministry in Romania? Hopefully somebody. Hey, but so is
there thought, like, obviously the gospel is the gospel, so I'm going to just train people up to share the gospel, and what we train and do in ministry is effective from top to bottom. Like we said, one size fits all for everybody. Right. And so they don't know the nuances of dealing with the different generations and how different people are driven.
How do you communicate the gospel? Always has to be, we have to become experts on how you communicate the gospel.
Yeah. And that's what Paul said, to the Jew I become a Jew, to the Roman or Gentile I become a Gentile. The gospel message doesn't change, but the way we communicate it does. Right. Because there's a big difference between a Gen Xer and a Gen Yer, all the way down now with a new generation of people, like you were just talking about with your sister. There's such stark differences between the different generations, and we better understand those things and how they view God, how they view society, how they view people, all of that, and that allows us to be more effective in our presentation of the gospel.
Absolutely. So I was at a meeting with the Pentecostal National Youth Directors. I'm a part of this network of Pentecostal National Youth Directors in Europe. We have yearly conferences. We do other conferences and stuff, but I was at one particular meeting with probably 60 or 70 different leaders from all across Europe. They grouped me in with the Eastern Europeans because I'm serving in Romania. The Western Europeans, everybody's kind of got their, everybody has their niche and everybody's doing their thing. And, where the Lord has placed everybody is, his unique design. Okay, so there was a small debate because Eastern Europe is far more conservative than Western Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Ukrainian brothers were having a discussion, and they brought in the Romanian one of the Romanian leaders, and then they brought me in because it was a healthy discussion, but it was one of those things where it was like, let's really talk about this.
Sure.
And then my Czech brother, and then this other guy, I don't remember. He was from France. They're chit-chatting, and the Western Europeans were saying, okay, you guys come in your suits and ties and your entourage, and you're expecting at church and in the youth meetings, like showing these youth camps of all these young people dressed up like out in the woods with the big. Our camps in Eastern Europe are really camp. Okay, camps in Western Europe are like camps in the United States, where you call it camp, but it's kind of like staying in a hotel or like a really dingy, big thing, a lodge.
Yeah.
So they're kind of comparing these things, and it's like the Western Europeans will show up at those things. One guy's shabby hair, kind of sloppy, flip flops. Bang! I'm there at the.
What you'd probably see here.
Yeah. It's just not as conservative.
Sure.
Okay. So they're saying, you guys, you're kind of behind on the times with all this stuff. You see how the world is evolving, and it really was healthy conversation, and these guys were smiling at each other, but really trying to get down to the bottom of how do you tick? What is this all about?
Sure.
So. Ukrainian guy says, okay, so I should become like you. How many churches do you have in your Western European country? Oh, in our network, we have like 75, in a land space of about Oregon. I don't know how many churches would be in the Pentecostal movement in Oregon. Yeah, we got about 75. Now, okay, truth be told, the gospel has a whole lot more opposition in Europe. Numbers, you want to talk about numbers, we're not talking about the same numbers. Yeah. It is much more difficult. Islam is a real thing. You have a lot of postmodern opposition, especially in Western Europe. Okay, the church is declining everywhere, by the way. Yeah. So they say, we have 75 or whatever the answer was, under 100. I said, okay, we should become like you. Where the churches are dying, we have over 1,000 churches in the same land space. Yeah. And in our youth camps, we have 1,500 young people come. Yeah. You talk about 150. Yeah. I think you should become more like us.
Yeah, my whole thing is, I think everybody should just slow their roll and be who they were called to be, and be who they're called to. Yeah. Because the reality comes down to, it's again, the overall theme we're hearing it throughout this podcast is one size does not fit all. No. And if you're trying to deal with conservative people and you show up looking raggedy, they don't even care what you have to say. Hey. And vice versa. If you're dressed to the nines, but you're trying to minister to people who aren't dressed like you, then immediately there's a judgment that goes out, like we don't fit in or we don't relate. So I learned early on in ministry, you got to know your audience. Yeah. And so what works in Eastern Europe, it definitely doesn't work in Western Europe. Definitely. And again, for those of you watching and listening, we're not talking about changing the gospel message. No. We're talking about understanding the culture and how we relate to people so that we can better present the true message, and that's unchanging, the gospel message of Jesus Christ with integrity, and but understanding that there are ways that people receive that message differently. Right.
And I that was very eye-opening for me, because I would say I was still young in my missionary, I don't like to call it a career, but my missionary whatever. I was definitely still a newcomer to that group of people, enjoying the conversation, and my eyes were wide open at that point. That was actually about in that season of life. That was when I realized, like you said, not one size does not fit all.
Yeah, that's right.
And every church is its own individual. And I would show up once upon a time. Oh, you want to start a youth ministry? Okay, I'm going to bring my team, my worship guys, my this, my that. We're going to bang it out, and we're going to help you start a youth ministry. Well, next week I'm not there.
Yeah.
And
not the same.
we draw your crowd of 50 or what, again, we're talking about different numbers in Romania,
Sure.
in Europe.
Yeah.
We show up and we do our thing. Next week, you don't have the same experience.
What you used to draw them's no longer there.
Yeah, exactly. So they're
yeah.
like, this is kind of lame this week.
Yeah.
So you work with what that church has.
Sure.
You help them do their thing. But the context in Europe, in Eastern Europe, is actually the churches are still planting. They're still planting churches in most of the Eastern European countries. You talk of more revival. Seems like that last line of Eastern Bloc, that right where that Iron Curtain used to be. That is the place where you still talk about revival, and you still talk about the churches are being planted and growing.
Yeah.
You start heading west, there has been a whole lot more opposition that started popping up even during communist era, which those kinds of influences just had. There was no such thing as a lot of this modern thought coming into communist countries. It just didn't happen. So the influence started much later.
Would you say, like, opposition-wise and struggle-wise in ministry, where you're at, is the political ideology of communism more of a hurdle, or is the invasion of the Islam and how Islam is prolifically spreading across Europe and the world right now, is that the greatest hurdle, or is there a different hurdle that you're trying to?
I wouldn't even say today that that communism is even a subject anymore. I mean, you have 25-year-olds that have never stood in line for bread.
Yeah.
They've only shopped in large grocery stores. They know nothing about that. Their culture and their upbringing is something entirely different. Their parents would remember how things used to be.
Sure.
But even they have been raised in a different culture, a different country.
Yeah.
Their passport that they used to have, if they had one, is now issued by a different country.
Yeah.
They are no longer residents of the same name country.
Yeah.
Most of them. So, like you talk about the Soviet Union. Soviet Union is irrelevant.
Yeah.
All of the Soviet Union are different.
USSR, is no longer there.
Ukraine was a state.
Yep.
Now it's a country.
Yep.
Wow.
Like it's an irrelevant conversation when you're talking to people that are 40 and below.
Yeah.
So, what is the opposition? The church, postmodern thinking is deteriorating society.
Yeah.
And it has been for a long time. The church, it's been a long time since I've actually looked for the number. We'll say, and no one get upset that I don't remember every number.
Yeah.
In 20 years from now, give or take, they say that Islam will be the prominent religion in Europe. Okay, and when they talk about the decline, they're mostly looking at Eastern Europe and saying in Western Europe. They're saying in Western Europe, people are actually converting to Islam. Okay, Eastern Europe, there are lots of believers that are strongly believing. That are strongly believing in Jesus Christ. Okay. Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, whatever. I've actually found, like, in my perspective, man, if half of the problem has been solved, you actually believe that Jesus is the Son of God. there's no argument there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Western Europe, I don't actually believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Oh, we're convince me that Jesus is the Son of God. Wow, we're starting just below ground zero.
Sure.
Like there, or maybe just beyond ground zero. You know the name of Jesus, but you've already identified in your own heart that Jesus is not the Son of God. Mm-hmm. That's a tough fight. I wouldn't despair just yet.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't despair just yet. I'll say that I have, being a part of this international culture of youth leaders. Man, God does not sit on his hands and watch again. And we're not talking about it for the first time. History there's been this wave in and out of Islam taking over Europe. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't want to sidetrack, but this is not the first time. This is not the third time.
Yeah.
Islam is at a place where they're at the they call it the nonviolent takeover of Europe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where they're just moving.
And
I'm
also
gonna move
and
to Europe.
in that non-violent takeover, even the people who move in and become
not to say that it's not aggressive.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what I've been reading too is in part of this non-violent takeover of not just Europe but of the West.
Yeah. Oh, it's starting here.
It's starting here.
It's definitely starting here.
They come in and they assimilate into our neighborhoods, but not assimilate into the culture. They keep their own. But the reality is they're having 5 or 6 or 7 children that are growing up.
It's the silent takeover.
That's what I mean. That are growing up in the Islamic faith, where the Christians in Europe and around the West are having, I believe it's 1.2. Now you can see this graph and this video on YouTube if you search for it, and how they're all of the nations are going to be Islamic within 20 years just by population alone, because they're having so many more children than people in the West or Christians, so to speak.
So people talk about this rapid decline of the church, and it is a reality. Like it is not. It is nothing to play with.
Yeah.
Hey, in our watch.
Yeah.
That junk ain't gonna happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's not gonna happen.
Sure.
You know, and I believe that even in the idea of we need to ramp up youth ministry, because even in the postmodern cultures, the very you might even argue the only people that are open to the gospel are teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The kids in a lot of places, the postmodern parents are not going to send their kids to a church.
Yeah.
They're not going to take them. They're not going to send them.
Mm-hmm.
But teenagers are still open to the gospel. The younger adolescents are still open to the gospel. Hey, so in a lot of these, far Western European countries, Sweden, the England, UK, Ireland, Spain, a lot of these Western European cultures, the church is on a rapid decline. Something that is very interesting is that the young people that are coming to faith, they come to faith with a wild faith, a different brand of faith, you would say. Like they believe in an entirely different way. They're so much more proactive than their parents ever were.
Yeah.
They ruffle the feathers on how much evangelism they're going to do. They do mass evangelistic crusades when adult congregations are saying, that's not how, we're going to offend people. They're not interested in what's going to offend people.
Right.
They just know this is their turn and it's going to happen. Man, I went to a meeting once. I'd heard about a ministry called Jesus Revolution. Man, look it up. Jesus Revolution. I heard about them, and it's kind of like you hear things and you just wonder, is that real?
Right.
Man, I've heard all kinds of things.
In 25 years, we've heard a lot.
Sometimes you hear things and you say, I don't know about that.
Sure.
You know, and I kept on hearing about this Jesus revolution stuff. And they're just going after it. And they're doing things. And it was mostly in these Western European countries where the church is going out. Well, I went to this meeting where afterwards we're in Prague, and this could we're in after the meetings, you get everybody together, and then you just you start stomping around the city and see where you've been having the meeting for the last couple of days. It's frigid cold, probably the coldest I've ever been in my life. Okay, I was freezing cold. We're all walking as a group of 70 leaders, something like that. Just kind of walking through the middle of Prague, the Czech Republic. There were these drunk Brits, and I didn't know this, but so Prague is kind of like what Americans would consider Vegas.
Okay.
For Brits. Brits go to Vegas go to Prague to let their hair down.
Yeah.
Okay? So these guys were drunk, belligerent, kicking over trash cans, yelling, and I heard them long before I ever saw them. Okay? When they turn the corner and then you actually see these people that are coming, there are these three drunk guys. They're just making a ruckus. Everybody's kind of like, okay, here they come.
Yeah.
These Jesus Revolution people who were also at this National Youth Directors meeting, man, they did not skip a beat. They just went right after them. They're like the 3 or 4 Swedes that just went, man, they didn't even have time to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. The guy that was kind of the ringleader, he was all of 22. Just a young kid. Okay. And that's how they do it. They say, hey, the military will give a $40 million jet to a 25-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Why can't they lead in ministry?
Sure.
Right.
Go for it.
So they do it. So the Swede goes, pulls off his jacket. Okay, one of the loudest guy, the most belligerent guy, was wearing a T-shirt. He lost his jacket somewhere along the way, and he was beat red. Okay, so this Swede goes, puts his jacket on behind him. Didn't say, hey, are you cold? You want my jacket? He just goes up behind him. Bang. He flips out a little bit. He said, whoa. You're cold, man. You lost your jacket somewhere. Warm up. It's, kind of took the edge off. He realized at that point, in all of his drunkenness, that, oh, wait a minute, I am cold. This feels good.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, we're going to be walking that way. Why don't we just, when I get cold, I'll take the jacket. When you're cold, until our paths part.
Yeah, sure.
Without skipping a beat, 30 seconds into this, he says, hey, what do you think about Jesus? Hey, the guys that everybody else was wanting to stay away from, these guys go right after him.
Come on.
And said, here's my jacket. Now you're walking with me. What do you think about Jesus?
Right on.
And at this point, I'm like, okay, I want to see what's going on, because these crazy Jesus Revolution guys, I want to see it with my own eyes.
Sure.
Okay. They're walking. The guy is shocked by the question. He says, Jesus? Jesus is okay for my grandma.
Yeah.
My grandma goes to church, but not for me. And he quotes, all the, the catchphrases. People pray to God and nothing happens. It's the Bible is handed down through man, and man has messed it up. And just went on a couple little phrases. He says, well, so you don't believe in the power of God? No, because when people pray, nothing happens. Yeah. Okay. What if I pray for you, and I pray that the Lord would sober you up? Would you believe? And they kind of chuckled. They said, no, really, what if I pray for you and you're not drunk anymore? Would you believe then? And I'm thinking, dude, you're testing the Lord.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, okay, I'd believe. He said, okay, let's pray. Like, here? Right here. Now, mind you, we're about 45 seconds into the point where he puts his jacket on him.
Sure. Wow.
We're not far into this.
Yeah.
They're in a little circle, and this guy starts praying for him, and not far into a non-elaborate prayer, the Brit just starts shaking his hands. What's happening? What happened? He said, do you still remember what you said? He said, yeah. Oh, I believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus. Hey, these wild kids, these wild Swedish guys, they said, where are you from in England? Oh, I'm from such and such place. He said, find somebody. Find somebody. This was like 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
In the Czech Republic. I think that would have been about like 11 o'clock at night in England. They call somebody. Hey, I need somebody in this guy's town. Oh, call this guy. We're at this point, these Jesus Revolution people are calling other Jesus Revolution people, and they're orchestrated network.
Yeah.
They're now calling a perfect stranger at 11 o'clock at night, saying, "Hey, we got a guy here who just accepted the Lord. He needs a church."
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Call this person. Twice removed. They're calling complete strangers and come up with a list of like 3 or 4 churches for them to visit.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay. God does not sit on his hands.
That's right.
And I recognize that we have issues that need to be addressed. But the Lord is still the Almighty God, and when He says in His Word that the kingdom is not a kingdom of talk, but a kingdom of power,
Right.
He meant it.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, for those of you watching who say, man, I don't see a lot of miracles in the church anymore, do you realize that the majority of miracles that you read about, even in the New Testament, were all in the marketplace?
Right.
And so if you want to see, like JJ said, it's almost like testing God. God will show up and show out in the marketplace. He will prove himself to people. A lot of people are like, man, that's like, I don't know, that's not just a scary prayer to pray, but is that an illegal prayer to pray, to test the Lord God like that?
Right.
But if you even remember Doubting Thomas, that's what we call him, Doubting Thomas. He's like God. He's like Jesus. When Jesus showing up after the resurrection, he's like, I don't even believe it's you unless I can put my hand in your scars. Yeah. Is it really you? And Jesus did not rebuke him. He said, come on. I'll prove myself to you.
Right.
And that's how God is out in the marketplace, especially. God will prove himself. Why? Because of his great love for people. He doesn't want one person to perish. So as we step out in faith and lean on God for big things, almost like Elijah on the top of Mount Carmel, calling down the fire from God will respond because he will withhold nothing for those people who need to know him as Lord and Savior.
Right.
Why do I know that? Because he sent his one and only son. He withholds nothing, no good thing, and so the reality, if you want to see miracles, step out into the marketplace and represent Jesus. Right. And the hardest cases I've found, because in our church, we do a once a month ministry on the second Saturday of every month. And we go out into the streets of our local community and we do what's called a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And we go out there, and so we'll pray together before we head out and ask God for clues. The clues are the people. So people will all be praying, and someone will write on green t-shirt, and then another person will have Target, another person will have another clue, and then we just put them all together and say, okay, someone heard Target, someone heard green shirt, someone heard aisle 12 and shoulder pain. And I'm not kidding you. We will go to Target, to aisle 12. There'll be a guy with a green shirt standing there. We'll walk up and say, hey, can we pray for you? Do you have shoulder pain? Yes. How did you know? And there's divine appointments, and people are getting healed and saved in the marketplace every time we go out like that. And I'm just like, most people are like, I'm scared to even share my faith. I don't know if I want to go. But God is raising up a generation and a movement of people who believe in the word of God, believe he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, who will move in power and that are not ashamed of the gospel. And we're going out, and even now we're seeing people healed and restored. I remember one of the treasure hunts where one of our guys were out there. This woman was having knee trouble, and she had surgery on her knee, all of the scars, all of the everything, and an 8-year-old girl put her hand on that knee and began to pray. Wow. And not only was the knee healed before the woman's eyes, was it a woman or a man? I can't remember now. Not only was the knee healed, but the scars disappeared before their eyes. And this was an 8-year-old girl praying, so God is using everyone and anyone in this generation who will just say, you know what, I've heard the call to go, and so for those of you watching, if you want to check out that ministry, second Saturday of the month, we all meet at our Bethel West campus, which is our Spanish church campus. And you don't have to be an expert minister. You don't have to be trained in the prophetic, although there are people there who are experts in leading these kind of things. And they're going to teach you to hear God's voice. And we're going to go out and you're going to see not only people won to Jesus, which is the greatest miracle, but I promise you're going to see other miracles and divine appointments and divine encounters. So that's what God is doing, not only here, but around the world as people get bold in their relationship with Christ. Now we have breaking news as we kind of are winding down in this podcast. I didn't even know this, but JJ, who's been a missionary for 25 years to Romania and Eastern Europe, and you've heard just doing great things with the youth ministry and just carrying the fire and passing the torch and raising up leaders and doing all of those good things. The breaking news is, I just heard you're going to Spain.
Going to Spain, man.
So what's going on with that? What's happened, and how did God bring that about?
God definitely brought it about, and I'll be honest, it's I talk to people and they say, you're nuts, man. You should have jumped at this quicker. My wife and I have been kind of struggling with the idea of going to Spain. It's a bigger nut than that, really. So in all of the we call it youth ministry advancement that we do. In all of this youth ministry advancement stuff, we do conferences. We do international youth ministry training conferences. So we bring in the leaders to our conferences. Several countries. I think the last time, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not speaking evangelistically, I just can't remember exactly. Like 28 countries, about 350 youth leaders. Again, numbers in Europe, they're always just going to be different. But man, that's ground shaking. Yeah. For our context, that is ground shaking. So we're very much active in this bigger picture of training and helping people to understand how to communicate the gospel into teenagers right now. Yeah. Well, for the last few years of doing this in Romania, because we always do our it's called Mandate Conference. We always do our Mandate conferences in Bucharest because I say, hey, it's going to be free. Yeah. And the only way for it to be free is if I have my two hands making sure that everything is free. Yeah. You're going to do it at my church with our facilities and all that. So it's going to be free. Well, as the years have clicked by, it's become more and more obvious that Romania might not be the best place to do that type of ministry. It's kind of like, you can do an international conference in Glendale, California, which is a fine place to go and do things. Yeah. Or you can do it in Anaheim, California. Yeah. Where are people going to go? Yeah. They're going to go to Anaheim. Sure. Romania is there's lots of boring reasons why. Romania can be expensive to fly in and out of, and if you're doing conferences, that needs to be addressed. Yeah. It's not very attractive. People will say, "Hey, I'll go," but this is also my family's vacation time.
There's a reason why the Assemblies of God General Council, I'm talking worldwide Congress, so to speak, was in Orlando last month because people use it also as a vacation. It's a destination. So not only do you go and get to go to the conference and get built up and poured into, but then they also turn it into family vacations where people can hit Disney or go to the beach and do a little bit of vacation around it too, and if for the investment.
Yeah, if you're in the concept, if you're understanding that you're in a scenario where almost everybody you're going to be looking at is not being paid to do this. They don't have a budget to go back and forth. They're doing it on their own dime, and they're going to go because they are really passionate. They really want to learn, how can I spread the gospel better in my country to young people in my context. So you need to make it, you need to address certain things.
Sure.
Okay. So I I travel outside of Romania about once a month doing something.
Yeah.
Teaching in conferences, or I'm teaching in Bible schools, or I'm doing a camp or something. I'm doing something about once a month outside of Romania. Mm-hmm. For these last 5 years especially, I just knew almost right off the bat, man, I sensed in my spirit that there's going to be a strategic change. If we're really going to if we're going to treat this responsibly, we need to make.
So almost like you're going to Spain to take it to the next level.
We're going to Spain to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Because Spain, you fly cheaper. Mm-hmm. It's much more attractive. Mm-hmm. It doesn't freeze over for half of the year like Romania can.
Yeah.
It's not daunting for people that have never been there. Man, everybody wants to go to Barcelona.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, I've been to Europe only once, and my wife and I made kind of a tour through Spain and Italy, and it was just a great time. But the city that we loved, Barcelona.
Barcelona is the gem of Europe. Now, okay. So I've been offered, not to make myself sound like anything, but I've been offered some pretty sweet deals. Come to our country, live in this house. You're going to do this. We're going to do that. And there's always been reasons why it wasn't going to work. And some of the times you just say, this is equal to my situation in Romania. So
and
why
you have
change?
to be faithful to your call.
And you have to be faithful to your call.
Yeah.
And it was always youth ministry stuff. It was always youth ministry stuff. But it wasn't necessarily going to be an advancement of we can do this at the next level.
Sure.
But we went to Spain. This was right after our last big conference in Romania. Of course, COVID threw everything for a loop. We're already talking 2.5 years ago. Okay. Mm-hmm. We had our last big conference. The next day, I went to a prayer conference, and I'm just going to be honest with everybody. I usually don't like to go to prayer conferences because I feel like you don't pray much.
That's right.
We preach on prayer. And, but it was going to be in a monastery somewhere in some city I didn't know of in Spain, and I thought a couple days to just wind down after having these 28 nations come to my church.
Yeah.
I could use that. So the very next day, I'm in Spain. My wife and I, we land in Barcelona because we got a cheap flight. Mm-hmm. And everywhere we'd go for the last few years, or anytime I'd have some thing, we would always ask the question: Could this be the next place? Mm-hmm. We get to Barcelona, looking around, and it's like,
I would like this to be the next place.
Man, my favorite place in the whole world is Portugal.
Okay.
If I could go anywhere for JJ, it's going to be Portugal. And I had one of the sweetest deals, the sweetest offers from some of the most wonderful friends and allies in youth ministry, buddies for life.
Yeah.
But there were a couple things that strategically it wasn't going to work.
You just knew it wasn't.
It wasn't going to work.
It wasn't God.
It wasn't God. And all of those offers always just kind of fall off the table pretty quick.
Sure.
And we get to Barcelona, look around, say, could this be it? You look around for another hour and you say, let's grab a cup of coffee and let's talk about this.
Yeah.
My wife. So, we're talking, we look at flights. Man, flights are cheap in and out. Looking around, it's hard to find a place that's not gorgeous in Barcelona.
Sure.
It is a hub for the cheap flights in and out in every direction in Europe. And it has become a hub for international conferences in Europe.
Yeah.
It's kind of checking all the boxes. It never freezes. It's like Southern California, where we're from. It's not really going to freeze. It might get a few cold days, and you got to watch the grapes.
Sure.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
There's no ice on the ground this thick. Like, it doesn't do what it does in Eastern Europe. And that affects the way we move and the way we do things. The only thing that was really missing was, I'm a local youth pastor.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go somewhere and just do some nebulous thing. I'm not going to go somewhere and just plan a bunch of events and conferences. To me,
because you want to be embedded. I always value, and those of you watching, just so you know, in a minute we'll allow JJ to share how you can help resource them and whatnot. But I always value ministry who aren't just doing big events somewhere, but are embedded in the local church.
I will say it's easy to get lost in those events and say, I plan all year long to do a thing.
Yeah.
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 And I won't say anything more about that, not because
I hear you.
I do have a quick question. It kind of like goes back to like what you were saying about like what's the spiritual weather of where you were in Romania, but like what is it like in Barcelona? Like, like what's
they are lost.
The call for there?
They are lost. They are lost, and they're also kind of you would say in Spain, Barcelona is kind of a marginalized region of Spain because they're Catalan. They themselves are kind of, you go looking for older maps, they were their own country.
Yeah, the people group is kind of pushed aside.
And even in the church, there's
now a lot has changed since I've been there. I mean, it's been literally probably closing now 20 years. I don't know. It's been a long time. But when I was there, because of the nice weather and stuff, they did have a lot of homeless, like that you would see here. To me, it felt a lot like a very much, if I can say this, a cooler LA. You have the ocean there, and it's just beautiful. You have all of the tourist trappings, and you have the architecture, you have the history, you have the sports, you have the entertainment. It's just a really cool atmosphere.
Really nice vibe.
But also you have a lot of people who are transient coming in and out because it's so international. And like JJ was saying, there's cheap flights in and out, and it's such a tourist destination that people are just kind of flying in and out. So it's just like if you do ministry in Vegas where people are coming in and out, you are constantly dealing with people who are on the consumer side, who want to get something, who are there to let their hair down as well. But underneath all of that, there's a hurting people, and so it's just going to be amazing to see what God does.
Yeah.
And one thing they actually have, they have a culture of street entertainment.
Yeah, on La Rambla.
La Rambla, which is exactly where. So I'm going to go and I'm get back to this. They have it's legal to address the crowd.
Yeah.
So you can actually do open evangelism.
Oh wow!
If you're not drawing mass crowds, you can address the small crowd. It is totally acceptable.
Yep. And so you walk down the Rambla and there's street performers, there's people selling, there's people who have painted themselves like statues and people are taking pictures with. I mean, it is like...
It's a show.
It's like Venice Beach before everything went to marijuana.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you just have such an awesome collection of entertainers and people and something going on down there all the time.
There's a lot of
painters,
a lot of culture, a lot of, European culture and all that. And they're very postmodern.
Yep.
Very, very postmodern. Young people are still open to the gospel.
Now, you being in Romania for 25 years, and I believe your wife is Romanian too, right? You both speak Romanian. Right. So do you also speak Spanish, or are you going to have a learning? So you have a little bit of learning curve.
Bit of a learning curve.
Yeah. It is a metropolitan international city. Right. When we were there, it's amazing. My wife is Hispanic, so she is bilingual, and that's why we loved it, because she could so easily communicate with people there. But we also found there are a lot of people who even speak English there. Right. Yeah. It's pretty amazing, actually. Yeah. So there are going to be some hurdles to jump through.
So I went to this prayer conference, to get back to the prayer conference. And, it's kind of like, this was a prayer conference for AG missionaries, which in Europe, they'll allow the AG missionaries to go to a prayer conference. The Assemblies of God will pay for it once every 3 years. I never actually went to any, but it sounded like the right thing to do after I had my conference. It's kind of kickback. So I went there, and it's kind of like when you get pastors together, you before anything gets going, tell us who you are, tell us what you're doing. Sure. We shared J.J. and Nelia Ferrel. We're doing youth ministry in Romania. This lady says, "Hey, you were the ones that just did that big youth conference thing like last week." Yeah, yesterday. We just did. Hey, let's have dinner sometime. Hey, while we're here, we definitely have to get together. Okay. We sit down to eat. The lady sits down. She's like, I'm gonna go right at it. Come and be our youth pastor. We don't have any youth ministry in our church. We've tried and tried again. We just little things, but we haven't really going for it. So I got kids that are getting older. We all know what happens to kids when they don't have a good thriving youth ministry, and it's really the area. We'd say send them to another church, but it's the area. And I know probably maybe even better than she does was really going on in that area in youth ministry.
Sure.
So it's very, very true. So I'm poking my wife under the table, and she's poking me back. It's like the only thing that's really missing is that invitation to do something. And then she lit it up. Now, truth be told, this was 2.5 years ago, and we chewed on it until about 2 months ago, and finally just came to the conclusion that
let's go.
If we're going to relocate, it's better to do it when I'm 45 than to keep thinking about it, go do a 4-year term, come back, itinerate for another year, and then go back when you're 50. That's a different number.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know the national leadership in Spain. I hit the ground running, so to say, in the area of youth ministry. It's a different animal right now. 5 years from now, it might be different. Okay,
yeah.
Check this out. Once we finally came to grips and said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
You got to call the bosses. The bosses have to be on board. We said we're going to pray about it for a week, and see if this is really a good decision. Then we're going to go into this right. Boss calls me that day.
And let me pause there. For those of you watching and listening, any life decision that is big like this, even when you feel God is in it, there is wisdom in the counsel of the godly.
Oh yeah.
So you want to take those big life decisions with people you trust, who have your best interest at heart, but also people who hear the Lord and people who value your ministry, and you bounce those things off and you pull them in and you say, will you pray with me about this? And that way you receive, and that's what JJ is talking about. Too many people just jump blindly into something because they thought they've heard God, or maybe they have heard God, but they don't understand the seasons and timings of things. Timing is huge. And so what you're hearing is even someone who's been in ministry for 25 years and been doing all kinds of training himself and all the rest, when big life decisions and transitions come upon him, you can hear just the wisdom in his actions. He's like, you know what? This sounds good and this looks good, but the bosses have to be involved.
Yep. So the boss gives me a call. I derail the subject, say, hey, buddy, I don't know what you want to talk about, but we were going to wait a while, but he doesn't. I mean, he's a nice guy, but he doesn't just call. You schedule a meeting. Yeah. He's got he's the area director for Eastern Europe, so he's got plenty of missionaries and plenty of things going on. So you schedule a meeting. Well, for him to just call out of the blue when a few hours earlier, my wife and I were saying, okay, we need to pray about it, and then schedule a meeting with Jim. Now Jim's on the phone.
Yeah.
Talk with him. Thinks it's a great idea. So, well, you let me know if we really want to get this ball rolling, because if I bring it up to the other area directors, you can't pull this one back.
That's right.
Yeah. They'll start questioning whether did you really hear from God?
Yeah.
And
especially when you're getting ready
asking real questions.
Yeah, and especially when you're getting ready to leave a region that you've poured over 2 decades into, you have relationship with people and people who love you and people who count on you. And so those kind of people will always question, like, this isn't God, because they don't want you to leave.
They don't want you to leave.
And that's a good thing because they have love for you, but they just don't understand what's going on in your heart and your process.
Yeah. So after I talked with my area director, my buddy, Jim, he says, well, I think it would be wise if we would take a time of prayer. Yes, let's take a time of prayer. He said, however long you want, we can make a week, we can make a month, we can make a days. Just what do you think? I said, well, let's take at least a week to pray about it. He said, I will tell nobody.
Yeah.
But when you tell me, then it's all systems are go. Yeah. And then it's going to be on. So you just know if this is really the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I hang up the phone. 3 hours later, I have I do personally know the national youth director in the Spanish Assemblies of God. I know this guy. We operate together. We're kind of friends, but I don't talk often with this guy. Right. I looked back before. When was the last time I chatted with this guy? It was like 9 months before. out of the blue, which we know wasn't really out of the blue.
Yeah.
3 hours later, this guy is sending me a message saying, JJ, we're going to have a conference. We're going to have a meeting with all of our youth leaders and youth pastors across Spain. There are going to be probably 200 to 250 youth leaders that are either doing youth ministry or interested in youth ministry, and we're trying to get youth ministry back on its feet in Spain. Send us a 3 to 5 minute video encouraging all of our youth pastors and youth leaders to start their youth ministries back up again. Why should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Out of the blue, which we know wasn't out of the blue, if that would have been like, say, Iceland or Finland or somewhere else, you'd say, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But Spain?
Yeah.
That was more than out of the blue. So I go to the top of the stairs and said, Nelia, guess what just happened? And I explained the scenario to her. She said,
yeah.
I don't know what else.
Fingerprints of
I don't know what else we need.
Yep.
We still took a week.
Yeah.
We still took a week just to make sure that just a coincidence? Yeah. All systems are going.
So God's opening doors in Spain.
God is opening doors.
Well, as we wind down this podcast, I always like, no matter what guest is on, I like them to let us know how we can support and resource their ministry. And we really do try to bring on people here that I believe in. And here comes the pastoral endorsement, because I always say, the reality is I like people to know that when they give their money and their resources and even their prayer, that they are sowing their time and resources into good ground. And like I said, I love people who are doing ministry, who think globally and think on a big level like JJ is doing and what God is doing in his life, but also is linked and tied to the local church with boots on the ground who understand what's going on. And that's what you have here. So as you give finances into his ministry, the beauty of it is, that you are partnering and advancing the gospel, that one day when you stand before the Lord and he says, well done, good and faithful servant, he's going to say, good job for sowing into this ministry, because you have a reward that is JJ's reward, because you helped him and God move the ministry forward, and now it's going to be Spain. So I just want to let you know, let's be generous and just have a spirit of generosity for those of you who are watching. And I'm going to let JJ right now tell you how you can give towards his ministry, towards this transition, and seeing youth ministry develop all across Europe, and especially focusing on Barcelona and Spain going forward. So JJ, let us know how we can support you.
Okay, it is not a secret that that has been very difficult right now to make missions endeavors work. We came back to the United States knowing that we were going to be in a deficit already, because that's just what happens after a 4 years term. We had a 5-year term because we decided we were going to extend another year because it was kind of awesome what we were doing. So we knew that we were coming into probably about $1,500 a month under what we needed. That was kind of pre-COVID smashing things up even more.
Yeah.
Once we got to the United States, no one means to do this, and no one means to do this. People are broke.
Yeah.
Churches were not meeting. If the church had been committed and they're not taking offerings, where are they going to give the money from? So I had got nothing to say on that. I understand. We went from being about $1,500 under, and we lost about another $1,500 in monthly support. I'm hoping some of that starts to come back.
Sure.
But I'm not really seeing much evidence that it's actually happening yet. Hopefully it will. I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I know in the end it's got to come, because I've seen the writing on the wall.
Sure.
I've been at this long enough, and I know that you just be at the business of what God is interested in, and
where God calls, He equips.
If you're busy doing what you can do, the Lord will make it happen.
What we say, if you do the possible, God will do the impossible.
Amen.
Right?
Right.
And the reality is, for those of you watching, and he's going to give you his information in just a minute, but it's the monthly support that really helps them through. But maybe you're watching or listening and you're like, I'm not even comfortable giving monthly, or that's not in my budget, anything will help. Even a one-time gift will help, because we want to push him over the line so that he can get to Spain. Him and his family can get to Spain and do the work that God is calling them to. And
getting to all of Europe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it really is going to take all of us helping, those of us watching and listening, saying, you know what, let me do something here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we are Assemblies of God missionaries. We're not doing our own thing. We are underneath the covering of the Assemblies of God. And I don't actually have my own website. I would rather direct people to the Assemblies of God ag.org website, and then you go to missions and you find J.J. Ferrel.
So ag.org, you go to missions, and then you can scroll down and find J.J. Ferrel.
Yeah, it'll ask you to enter a missionary's name, last name, anything that you would know.
Yeah.
You could write in Spain and you could find me. You can write in J.J. Ferrel and find me. You could write in Ferrel and you can find me. But if you go to ag.org, go to the missions tab, and then there'll be something about
find
support
JJ.
a missionary. You can find me, and I'd rather people go that way than do some little jjferrel.org or whatever.
And also the beauty with giving through the AG like that, I believe you're receipted for your donations as 100%. Well. So it'll help you even in the tax purposes.
And people are usually leery about supporting an agency that is supporting missionaries, because they're worried that so much overhead is going to go to if I give $1, only 20
cents goes to the missionary.
That 20 cents is actually 95 cents.
Did you hear that? You give $1, 95 cents of that dollar is going to go to help JJ and his family.
And if we would have our own like 401k or something in order for us to be legally legit, like the real legal legit way in being in the European Union, we would actually have to have a private auditor. We'd have to have a private this and a private that. There would be so much that would be paid in that overhead, which it would be more than 20% that we'd be paying.
Right.
So this is a way better route. You'll see more of your dollar or dollars go towards advancing the kingdom.
We are really, really needing monthly support, but anything helps. Yeah. And in the end, all the offerings and all that stuff, there's not a bank account or something that comes to me. I have a work account that works only in the Assemblies of God, and they monthly will distribute out of that according to what is in there, my work. What is my work budget and my salary, all that stuff meant once a month only. I don't have access to any of that money. None of it. Yeah. So anything that is kind of above and beyond starts getting shifted into what is monthly.
Yeah.
So they say, okay, there's $500. Okay, divide that up by 48 months, because that's what it is.
Yeah. And then you're like, I can't live off that, but the reality is, again, when you give through ag.org, missions, J.J. Ferrel, there's strong oversight, there's integrity, there's security, and you can know that 95 cents of your dollar is winning souls across Europe and raising up youth leaders and youth ministries that'll be here long after you're gone. So
I mean, I'm
just
here
a beautiful
right now
thing.
in Tulare, California, and all of the ministry that we've been doing of helping to start youth ministries. And they're on the other side of the world, and Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, whenever they have their youth ministries, they're all winning souls.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of what missions really is.
The reality of missions is, if you've ever been in a missions conference or heard a pastor speak on missions, we can get motivated and realize, the Great Commission calls us all to go. Well, you, myself, and we may not be called to Spain or to Europe or whatever, but we can actively be involved with what God is doing around the world through resourcing missionaries like JJ, who are called by God to go and do the work of the Lord over there. Right. So I just want to encourage you, be generous. Those of you hearing this, I know because this is a podcast, it's not necessarily live, but you'll be seeing it in the future. But even if for some reason you were to watch this a year from now and pick it up online because it's already been posted, but you didn't see it and it's a year from now, I would hope that you would go to ag.org, look up his ministry and say, you know what, here's a blessing, or I can maybe even monthly support a certain amount, because all of that will help the ongoing ministry that's there. So it's not a closed window here. It's an ongoing window. We just want to see, and the more people who give and the bigger the war chest is, the more that JJ will be able to do over there, because advancing the gospel takes resources, and there's
all a good idea until you actually have the resources to make it happen.
That's right. And there's a poverty mentality out there saying that the minister should live below and beneath, and he should, basically live in abject poverty while he's giving. We don't want to see that. You don't want that for your family. And JJ's got a beautiful wife and beautiful children, and they need schooling, they need clothes, they need food in their mouth, they need a roof over their head while he's doing the work of the ministry, or I should say while they are doing the work of the ministry. So we need to kind of push that out of our thought life, because it takes money and resources not only to live, but then it also takes money and resources to fuel all of those dreams that God has placed in JJ's heart for the nation of Spain and Europe. And so I just want to ask you again to be generous and to support this ministry that I believe in. Mm-hmm. Well, JJ, it's been so awesome that you were able to join us here. And it was amazing learning a little bit about Romania, about your call into missions, about missions in general, about what God is doing in the lives of people around the world. Because sometimes we can get just so narrowly focused on what's happening right here in Tulare, so it's great to hear what God is doing abroad. And I just want to say, God bless, bro. And I've, even though we don't talk all that much, I just really enjoyed your friendship throughout the years. And for those of you watching, look forward. We have other podcasts coming with other worldwide ministries and people involved doing things around the world. And we're going to keep you informed on what God is doing and how you can be a part. And so God bless you guys. And thank you for tuning in with me and JJ and Deidre. And God bless.